all it comes down to is self-control and prayer. Okay, if you understand who the enemy is and you understand what the sin is, and the sin's going to block God's grace, and you're seeking God's grace, then it's a lot easier to overcome. And it's not an easy battle. It's not easy for anyone, including myself. But when you're confronted with those things, it's like I said, you have to pray intensely, in the same way that you would defend your wife from being, mauled and raped or attacked by a wild animal, or the same way that a man would protect his family. That is the kind of intensity you have to go into spiritual battle to protect your soul.
And Vince are back. I think we got a great topic here, because this is a topic I could go on whether I was recording something or not recording, if I'm in a men's group, talking to my own kids, or just people a little older than me, different stages of life. And that is, this is just me and Vince talking, but certainly comment section you guys can talk about, and just different stages in life, trying to conquer those, just the general passions all of us men have. But on top of that, also staying within church teachings, which I would argue a Protestant kind of gets a little get out of jail free card for some of these things. Maybe we can get into that as a side topic. And I'll just say this up front. I think that's a main reason why a lot of men in particular will jump with Protestantism or some sort of Bible church, because it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to pick the Bible and pick the things I like this, don't like that, especially of them being cradle Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
We can probably get into that for sure. So before we go on, though, Vince, I said this the last time, plug your 2 books that you got just at the start of the hour here.
All right. Well, the first one I got here it's concerning Chloe, and that can be found on lulu.com. It's a personal testimony, and as I've said before, something very dear to me. And the only reason it was published was, I shared it with a priest, and for his words is that if I thought it could help one person, then I not only had a duty but an obligation to publish it. And so I did that. And I've kind of been discerning that for a while, and I'm glad it's finally happened. The other one is Beyond the Second Veil. And the main reason for publishing this one was there are so many messages and so many seers and things like that out there today on the internet. And I noticed just in what's come across my feed, a lot of things that are not legitimate, I guess I would say. Either that or they're confused. Now, with that being said, those kind of fall into a different category. But basically what this does, this book here it's a study into eschatological theology using the scriptures. And again, the main reason for doing that was to kind of counter a lot of the false narratives that are out there about the end times, about the church, about things like the Pope being the Antichrist and that kind of thing. And so it does go pretty deep into scripture. And the way I wrote it was, in one sense, the average layperson will take a lot away from it as far as reflection. But then there are other things in there where I know that scholars and theologians will pick up on that could lead to other things that are deeper, that the average layperson wouldn't. So I tried to keep it balanced that way, and it has been submitted to a scholar for feedback. And I think 2 or 3 times within the book, what I did make very clear is it's not a proclamation or a definition of sacred scripture or the interpretation of scripture. These are based on my own study, my own contemplations, things that I believe that the Lord's revealed to me within the scriptures. It's really for the church. And so, I don't want to lay it out there as, this is this, this is this, this is that, because the scriptures are living. And I think it's really important to understand that. So try to lock down prophecy within scripture, I think is, you're starting off on a wrong foundation to do that. So anyway, awesome. That one can be found on Amazon or at lulu.com. On some Amazon sites, you'll find it for like $18, which is the same price on Lulu. Other ones, you'll find it, they've like doubled the price for it. So, depending on where you shop, you'll find a better deal.
Okay, awesome. And we'll link all that stuff down below here. So this topic, I don't know if we're calling it maybe conquering the passions, but I don't know if you ever really do conquer the passions. I guess you maybe keep them at bay. I don't know, but I know we both I think we both had typical upbringing. I don't say typical, I mean atypical, but we didn't come from little house in the prairie upbringings where we were granted great graces of having I would say, basics of church teaching, not only instilled upon us, but instilled upon us in a good way, because you can do it obviously the bad way. And so I thought we would take it through three different stages of life, approaching traditional church teachings or just basic church teachings, in conquering the passions through youthfulness, maybe talking to a son, daughter, yeah, not even that's a whole separate discussion, the distinction between those two, and then just getting in maybe into single life, which that we stage you're in, but that could be you're in post marriage, but it could be pre marriage, and then also conquering the passions as a married person, married man, or it's all this in the context of talking to guys out there. So that's where I thought we'd go with it. Maybe we can set the stage too on when we say conquering the passions. I think we'll be a little bit more specific into, I would say, we live in a sexualized culture, so I don't think we'd go into too much detail to what we're talking about. And I'll share this. Maybe we get into the young person struggle, but for a young person now, I think it's incredibly hard with literally everything. And having discussions with my oldest son, he's already realized, like, this is how do you overcome stuff when you're trying to avoid. He knows what scantily clad dress stuff is, and if you see it just going on your typical TV app, I mean, just an ad scrolls by you, and that's just enough for some things.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy out there. So I guess maybe Vince, set the stage where you think when we say conquering the passions, what do we even mean by that?
Well, the passions of the flesh, and so in Scripture, Paul talks about he goes through an entire list of passions of the flesh. Now we know that the spirit is opposed to the flesh, and so that's really the challenge is to try and fall in line with the desires of the spirit rather than the desires of the flesh. And so for me anyway, when we approach it, or when I approach it with the foundation that we're fallen in nature because of original sin, then we're already starting off. Our first step is a wrong one, right? And so the only way to really, I would say, get them under control, right? Because if you take and really, I mean, what we're doing here is really kind of a male-oriented type of thing. We're really talking to guys, but we can fall into the same category with women as well. I think there's just as much women struggling with looking at things they shouldn't look at as men now. It's pretty close anyway. But as a young man, when you get into your teens and that your hormones are, I mean, it's just crazy. And so, I think the initial reaction, for a young boy when he starts noticing women and noticing figures and, those kinds of things, I think is normal. Probably some experimentation is probably normal, but there comes a time where there's a choice that has to be made. And so for me personally, I think if I would have made better choices when I was younger, would have had a huge impact on, what I went through. And so I think a lot of it, like you say, kind of has to do with the upbringing, but the foundation really has to do with communication. As you were saying, you were kind of talking to your son. I talked to my son. He's 14 now. And it's one of the things that I've always felt to be a great grace in my life is that both of my boys are not afraid to come to me and tell me and be honest with me. And, I think one of the important things for a father to do, and again, this is just my opinion, is to be completely honest with your son. Right. And so if they see that dad went through this and dad struggled with this, or dad, has temptations, then all of a sudden they're going to feel more comfortable about coming, excuse me, coming to their parents or coming to their father. And so, prayer life is the most important thing. That's the only way we will ever overcome the passions of the flesh. You know what I mean?
It's funny you said that too, because I had my dad coming in. He was helping us do something, and he went out to dinner afterwards. Him and my mom, the rest of my family, and my son. We were at the end of the table, so my son was with me next to me. I knew he wouldn't care because he likes to be vocal about stuff. And my dad, my dad's someone who never said anything sexual about a girl. Never heard him say anything remotely. Never said a swear and like that. Grew up in a very wholesome upbringing. But later on in life, told me how he really struggled with kind of scrupulosity. And talking to him when he was younger, he said that was something that caused him a lot of, because he felt he couldn't really express that to people, and he felt like that kind of made him feel bad. So with my son there, I said, you care if I tell Grandpa about these feelings? And he said no, because I knew, and my dad, I feel like, could relate to that because he saw this kind of wholesome kid like himself, and how much that kind of ate him up inside. So my dad's point, again, related this too, just he said to me in the past how a lot of just sexuality itself is still an appetite. We all have it, just like food or anything else.
Right.
And that's, you know, it's completely normal. He grew up on a farm, so you see things breeding all the time.
Yeah.
And I think with conquering the passions, even a young person, when I reflect on my son, I was exposed to stuff at an early age because my parents didn't really know what I was doing. I had access to cable TV, so I could go anywhere in the house and watch whatever I wanted. And I feel like I remember at an early age, I'm in kindergarten, being exposed to stuff and already planting those things. Where my son, I feel like, because he didn't have as much of that, was later in life, which
Right.
going back to the experiences you said, you don't have to go in details here, but you had things happen to you that for sure probably played a major role in that. And I think a
Oh,
lot of that
there's
is
no question.
not
Yeah.
just, so I guess exposure, and how do you control that exposure? Because the kid
Right.
can't control, the parent only can kind of really control that. And of course, those passions are going to be there. But
Right.
even as an adult, not to jump the gun, I feel like a lot of it is, it's just like having, if I have an abundance of chocolate in front of me, I'm going to want to eat chocolate as much as I can until I get sick of
Right.
it, you know?
Right. Yeah. And
So,
it's in front of us all the time. And so, you know, it's one of the reasons, you know, I'll say this. We have to come to a realization that what we're fighting is a spiritual war. Okay. And so you and I have kind of talked about this before, about spiritual warfare, about Catholic masculinity, you know, about how to go about, you know, staying in shape and that kind of thing physically. We have to do the same thing spiritually, right? So you think about it. If you're in a gym and you admire your trainer, right? Um, the guy, you know, stays healthy, he works out, he's fit, and so you're trying to build a certain group of muscles, right? And you talk to your trainer about it. You say, well, how do I, you know, what's a better way to go about that? What's a better way to isolate those muscles? It works in the exact same way in the spiritual life. And I'll tell you, it's not really a secret. I guess it's just more of an insight. Um, when I overcame the fear to talk to a priest about what happened to me when I was young, and then from there begin to open up about other things that transpired because of that, right? As far as sexual partners and things like that, fornication. Um, that's one of the things that the devil will use in a man's life in the area of spiritual warfare, because sexual sin, the very first thing a man will feel is shame. And
yeah.
he wants to get us to not say it. So, you know, I mean, and it happens on different levels. It can happen, you know, to where, you know, we give into the passion and then you feel the guilt and the shame. And
Yeah.
so, you know, and I know this has happened where young men would go to a whole other parish to go to confession to another priest so that their pastor didn't know it was them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, men will go way out of their way to avoid that shame.
And avoid
And
confession altogether. I was talking to someone, I won't say
yep,
it was, but someone literally today hasn't gone to confessions. They're 18, they're in close to 50. I know I should go. I know I should go. And so, well, I just don't. At the end of the day, I feel like this person doesn't want to go because of predominantly exposing sexual type sins. And that's the
yeah.
only thing that I think that is a real embarrassing obstacle.
Well, it is, and so that's. I mean, it's one of the things. One of the things that the devil uses is shame, and especially with sexual sin. If it goes all the way back to the garden, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's what happened. As soon they didn't even know they were naked until they ate of the tree of good and evil, right? The
Yeah.
knowledge of that. And what does Adam say? He says, you know, we heard you in the garden and we hid ourselves. We were ashamed because we were naked.
Yeah.
And so Satan will use um, that temptation to get you to fall into that sin so that you feel shame and then not want to confess it or not want, you know, anyone to know about it. And so in the last talk we had, we talked about a men's group, and it's one of the things that I have found in deliverance ministry, in healing ministry, and in men's groups, is that when you get men around together that begin to feel comfortable with each other, and you got one guy that's struggling with a certain thing and he finds out the guy down the table is struggling with the same thing, all of a sudden the whole thing opens up and you realize, you know what, I'm not alone in this.
Especially when it's somebody that you least would expect is struggling with this type of thing.
Oh yeah, because it's such a plague in our society, you know. And the well, let's just say it, the porn industry.
Yeah.
right? There is such easy access to it, and it has such a negative effect on the spiritual life, right? And so this is the way that I would approach this, okay, in conquering the passions. I guess I was kind of thinking about this when you and I were talking about doing this podcast. Was imagine that your family's life is in danger, or someone's attacking your wife, or someone's attacking your children. The ferocity that you would fight to be able to protect that, right? You would give your life. Most men would, okay? Or if you're not married and you don't have kids, then whoever it is that you love dearly, if that person's life was in danger because of some kind of violence or a break-in, I want if men would put their mind in that mindset, that is the mindset that you have to go into battle against these types of things. And so that it's a little easier for it to click for guys when they kind of connect those two. Okay, this is what I would do. This is the way I would react, right? Warrior mentality, a protector mentality, like a lion, right?
Yeah.
You have to approach the same thing in the spiritual reality, even though it's unseen, because the fact of the matter is you are fighting someone who is who wants to destroy your soul for eternity. And that's really what we're in a battle against.
Well, and it's the knowledge, like you said too, that it's possible. So sometimes you go to those men's groups, and like I said, I've been in some where I'm kind of surprised, and not in a judgmental way at all, but this might be coming from somebody that might be let's just say coming from a spiritual background, and maybe his job is in theology. This isn't, I'm not a priest, but you would think like, well, this person probably has under control in the sense where I guess what's possible, because I think if you look at it on the internet and you read a lot of these, I don't go in there all the time, but sometimes I'll go on the Catholic Reddit to see what's the pulse, what people are saying out of curiosity, which a lot of times you don't know how the age groups of people. But I think for a lot of men, it seems like an impossibility to control some of these passions, like the basic stuff. I mean, I remember hearing a guy tell me once, well, I won't say what it was, but because I just don't understand how, is it really a mortal sin is masturbation a mortal sin? Someone told me that, and I said, yeah. And the person's reaction was, well, that just seems impossible. Like it's right. Impossible not to. So I think the idea is we've so far gone, and it's also not only that, I think from a young age, it's almost at this point in some educational programs, it's saying it is almost taught that way, that it's an impossibility to overcome that. Right. So there's this balance of, while it is extremely hard in our culture, we also have to know that it is certainly possible to rid yourself of those cravings and those whatever, etc.
Yeah, it is. And there's different reasons for it too. If you read the catechism carefully, it says that for it to be a mortal sin, there has to be grave matter, there has to be knowledge, and there has to be willful consent. In that category that you're speaking of, there's a lot of other factors that can fall into that. Anxiety, stress, and so there's a lot of other categories. So, to nail it down as mortal sin, it would have to be, again, you have to know what you're doing. You have to willfully do it.
Sure.
And then the grave matter obviously is the action. Right.
And I think I even said that to him, like, now knowing this, so then it was like, it's almost one of those things I don't want to tell you because now you're going to have to know. And I thought I really was
right. And so, again, I think for young boys, I think it's normal. It's just normal. You know what I mean? They're probably young women as well. Okay. And it's just, they're curious. Okay. But it's a part of growing up. What we don't want to fall into is lust. Okay. Or desire. Those words, so if I look at a beautiful woman and I admire her as a beautiful woman, that woman's very attractive. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Yeah. When I begin to desire that woman in a sexual way for my gratification, that's when it starts to become a problem. And so lust is a very, very slippery slope. And so the more we can understand about demonology, right? Asmodeus is basically the demon in charge of all impurity, everything we see happening in the world. And he has legions and legions and legions of demons underneath him. He's one of the top demons in hell under Satan. Okay. Yeah. So you can imagine, the control they have over the world now, just in that area. Right.
Well, not to
to
not, I want to back up a little bit there what you
okay.
said, so in case we had misunderstood you there, because you were when you got back to saying it was those feelings I think that a young person would go through and they would think is normal. And were you saying that it was that even if they act in those things that it would be socially that would be within? I guess I don't think you were saying. Could have sounded
Well,
like
let's
you
say
were saying that.
let me put it this way. Okay, so how many have you? Let me ask you this: have you ever heard of a 14-year-old boy going through catechism class and being taught that masturbation was a mortal sin? No one ever talks about it.
Well, that was my
Do you see
next
what I mean?
step.
So they
Yeah.
don't know.
No,
They
that I
don't
agree with
know.
you. Yeah, that I agree
Yeah,
with. So I think that's where we kind of I agree with you on that. Well, the next step is so I think we're on the same page. That basically wasn't a mortal sin unless it was taught to them. But
right,
now the next step is, and this is where I get to maybe I can put a timestamp here. We're kind of segueing is for a young person, I can't identify it because I was not that person. That was not instilled upon me. It was
right.
like that time was a confusing time because you didn't talk about it at all. It was just something like even if you had education programs in school, it was like I don't really you kind of felt weird just in
Yeah.
general, all those things went through your brain. And
Hmm.
so now, if you have, and I've seen this, one of the other communities I will look into is I'm curious to see what people ex-Catholics see, and I see what I've heard people say, well, it messed me up psychologically for certain. They'll put these blames in the Catholic Church, the teachings, whatever. I'm going to rant, but there's this argument to be said. Well, now when you take that 14-year-old kid and then, or even younger than that, and you throw church teachings on top of that, and that's where I do kind of have sympathy and being careful with what I say with my son. I don't want to have you don't have this fire and brimstone over his head.
Right.
However, you want to teach him church teachings in the steps they're in as they're progressing in their adulthood, but you also don't want them feeling this heavy burden at a young age. That how do you control that weight on the
Right. Yeah. Where
shoulders?
they don't
Because
fall into the scrupulosity. Well, one of the ways is to understand when you have an understanding of the nature of sin. Okay, it's like you said, you would find surprise, this guy that teaches theology, and you think he'd have everything under control, and then you find out later that he's struggling with all this stuff. Anybody can fall at any given time, and we all struggle with certain things. Okay, now I thank God that I don't. It has to be a grace because I've been single for 3 years, 4 years now, and no, there's nothing. I have no desire. It's just gone. But I think it's meeting. It has to be met with prayer, right? So if it's approached in that way when you're talking to a young kid, you have them let them understand. There so many people are struggle with this way more than you, and that you have to welcome to the battle. That's where. So you remember when. Well, I won't say you remember, but just historically, like in the Indian tribes, right? Came a time where the boy became a teenager, and they would send this kid out to go kill a wolf, and when
Mhm.
you came back you were a man. It's the same thing. So you're entering into the same battle. That's why I say for guys, especially for young boys, because boys love superheroes. They love the whole idea of a just fight. That's what they have to look at it as. Okay, there's an enemy trying to enter into my spiritual life, my soul, in a way that blocks grace. And so, welcome to manhood, welcome to the struggle.
Yeah,
You see, and so if it's kind of put that way to where every young man understands they're not the only guy struggling with it, because see, it's like I said, that one word, shame,
yeah.
that an embarrassment, the whole thing that goes along with it, right? That's what Satan will use to draw people deeper into those kinds of problems, because sooner or later that act isn't going to be enough, and then they're going to
Yeah.
need an image, and then they're going to need a picture, and then they're going to need a movie.
Yeah.
And once you start opening those doors, then it's really, really, really hard to close for a lot of guys and a lot of women, I believe, as well.
Even at brass tacks level, though, I think some of the things I've seen is people they understand the church teachings and maybe they can shut off certain things and they try to they censor stuff on their phone, block all sorts of things, even just basic stuff like internet access.
Yeah.
That they still get this point of like physiologically, and this is what goes in. This is why I sympathize for. I don't know what it's like anymore, but the hormones at a young age, physiologically, and even I'd say being single in an older age like yourself, and even as a married man, if you're practicing within the church's teachings of times and periods of abstinence and things like that, that there's sometimes get to a point where there is almost like physiologically, for lack of a better term, and not to get graphic, there's like something is bottling up inside. There's like a
Oh
release
yeah.
point. And so it's like for a person, I've seen that like I just can't control it. That's the type of thing that like something has to give. And that's the part I always feel like for my son and for me, it's easier for me to say because it's a married state in life where I am now.
Mhm.
But maybe, I don't know if you can speak to that there's overcoming that's a whole nother level to,
Yeah. So you're, yeah, basically what you're talking about is
and then they
what
give
I would,
themselves some excuse too. They're like, well, I have to physiologically, something like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's doctors out there that will say the same thing, which is it's a bunch of malarkey. That it's not a lot of the science, what they try to push scientifically is ridiculous as well. Um, when it reaches that stage, and I can tell you this from experience, okay, I'm speaking from myself. It was at those moments that is when I got on my knees and I prayed as hard as I could.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so like in Medjugorje, Our Lady talks about praying with the heart. Let me use a different word because we were talking in the last video, we are talking about kind of a feminism, in the church, and it feels feminine and it's just hard for a guy to relate. Here's a different word for prayer that I would use, that Our Lady uses, pray with the heart: intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Make your prayer intense. Okay. And so where you're at, you're at the very top of that mountain, and you're about to grab that last handle and pull your way up, or you're face to face with that wolf, and that's where you have to have the courage to go through it. You see what I mean? And this is where like I say, from a man's perspective, because there's so many Catholic, or not Catholic, online influencers pushing this masculinity that's really toxic. In the sense, they talk about discipline, they talk about being in control, they talk about they don't need a woman, they talk about this, that, and the other. They can't control their passions. They have no control over anything they're saying.
Yeah.
So that's really the struggle. That is the climax of the battle. And so when you win that initial one, okay, you fight through that with prayer. And then when it comes, it's easier to beat that. Okay, I've been here before and I beat this, I can do it again. And so that's the thing, that's the way to progress through it, is you have to realize, okay, here I am, this is it. And so, you have a choice. You immediately go into prayer.
And this is why I like this discussion, because I think this topic in general, I think either aside from pushing people away from the church, there's people in the church that would rather just subtly ignore this or make their own rules to it. But on top of that, this thing is not going to put up on a pedestal as not only being a virtue, but a possible virtue to that next level of what we talked about with kind of what you're saying. Because I've talked to somebody, he's a famous Catholic speaker. I would say the story, but I don't know if he actually shares everybody. He shares it in men's groups, but he shared a story how his wife had a situation. Basically, he was married to his wife. They already had kids, but the fertile period was off, or no, it was something medically where they couldn't do the act, basically. And so for 2 years, they couldn't do anything. And how he shared like internally, and he kept to the faith. There was nothing he did to himself or anything doing his releases. Didn't go around any kind of mutual stuff with each other. So 2 years living with his wife and being true to the church, true to the church's teaching, how much that was a literal cross. And I'm thinking in my head, when that guy told the story, I'm like, his kudos went through the roof to me, because I'm thinking of how many other guys, maybe one thing you're sticking with your wife who's going through this illness, but to just say like, I'm not going to do anything for myself, no self-pleasure. And then not only that, I'm not going to skirt the rules with my wife, something else.
Right.
Where I think the vast majority of people would have done that, or they would have jumped ship and just,
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And it's easy for us to make judgments too. You know what I mean? I mean, from, me being, well, me being as promiscuous as I was when I was younger, and then married for as long as I was, then all of a sudden, being celibate, there's no doubt in my mind, people that know me think there has to be something going on. And
well, I wasn't calling you out for that, but I mean, I think that's why I think your story is important, because people hear, wow, that is possible, and what maybe people are.
And so the fact that it comes down to is self-control and prayer. Okay, if you understand who the enemy is and you understand what the sin is, and the sin's going to block God's grace, and you're seeking God's grace, then it's a lot easier to overcome. And it's not an easy battle. You know, it's not easy for anyone, including myself. But when you're confronted with those things, it's like I said, you have to go in, you have to pray intensely in the same way that you would defend your wife from being, mauled and raped or attacked by a wild animal, or the same way that a man would protect his family. That is the kind of intensity you have to go into spiritual battle to protect your soul.
How
You see
about
what I
it?
mean? And
Yeah.
once you start to do that, it's like I said, then what happens is I'll give you another one too, is that the entire thing can be switched around on the devil. And we've talked about this before. I think I've told you before. When you're tempted to look at a woman in lust, if you recognize that temptation immediately, right, and you begin to pray for her rather than, so now you've taken a temptation that Satan has placed in front of you or put in your mind, whatever it is, a thought, and you've turned it around and now you're using it against him. So that temptation isn't going to come as often.
Yeah.
Okay, or as intense. In the same way, let's say me being a single guy, right, and celibate, when those temptations come, and sometimes they're intense, that is a type of suffering or an assault, okay, that can be offered to God for the salvation of souls. So you take all this stuff around and you start using them as weapons in a very real spiritual battle. And we're in a lot of trouble within the Catholic Church as far as the pornography goes. I think it's something like 50% of Catholics don't even think there's anything wrong with it anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we understood the damage, so let's do this too, Mike. I was pondering this one, and I don't mean to run on here, but this is important. How many of us men wouldn't protect those we love with our life? Right? We would fight to the death to protect our wife, our children. For men out there, young men, married men that I'm speaking, that are going to watch this later, understand that when you view those types of things, what you're doing is you're opening up a door and making your family vulnerable to Satan. That is that is in fact what's happening. And so when you see it as for the enemy that it is, it becomes a lot easier to say, you know what, you're not going to be a part of my family. So you remember that when Paul's, there's this belief too from that I think kind of, I don't want to say a complete overall belief, but this vast belief that, if I'm there and I'm in a room and I'm watching it by myself, I'm not hurting anyone.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. I have personally been involved in deliverance ministries where that was happening in the house and the children were being attacked by demons because of what someone else was watching. Okay. The other thing that I would say is, you remember when Paul says that, St. Paul says, would you connect the body of Christ to a prostitute? Of course not. And then you move into the marriage thing. We kind of talked about this the last time, love your wife as Christ loved the church. That the two become one flesh. Yeah. A man who loves his wife loves his own body. And so we have to understand that we're spiritual beings. Even though we have flesh, we're spiritual beings, right? In the same way that if we view that kind of thing and we think that it's not going to have an effect on our wife who is spiritually one flesh, we're wrong.
Yeah. Well,
see?
Yeah.
And so that I think that for me anyway, it makes it a lot easier for me as a man to view it as a war, a battle. And there is a real enemy out there that wants to do damage. And once you see that for what it is, that's the reason it's so enticing.
It's also tempting, though. I'm playing devil's advocate, as I always do, for someone to, the foundational root of issue what I think you're getting into is how many people actually believe not just Catholic church teaching, but just Christian church teaching in general. And they'll pick and choose things that they've made their own religion in their heads. I think that's one thing. But when I think about how many people are out there nowadays that look at certain things, there's whole movements and groups around the idea of controlling your passions that are not religious at all, just almost an atheistic thing, and they want to conquer this.
Right. So
I like the idea of I'm trying to reach even those types of people, because I think if those people can accept it, then a practical guy can accept it. And I always think of a lot of the common problems people have, which these are all just addictions, because I always am surprised, even just among married Catholic couples, they struggle with different periods throughout a month, like a few days or a week, let alone years. And
Yeah.
they one can't understand someone like you, like your position. Like, one, is it possible? Practically, what are some steps to take? Because sometimes I'm seeing these things, I'm like, don't you see how this is just gonna, like, a lot of we talk about the secular. We got a whole separate video about this, but I think a lot of secular stuff, and I mean, already know this, but I'm at the point now where I think a lot of stuff for myself, you just can't watch it without getting some drip in your brain. And if you're struggling with this side of it, one practical thing you got to tell yourself is you just got to cut that stuff, off
You
completely.
got to cut it off.
And
Yeah.
that's just something I even just going on the internet and teasing the idea of struggling in this area, I think in itself causes
Mhm.
this stuff. And when I hear people's practical problems that I think a guy has and they complain about, all of it's sexually rooted. It's
Right.
aside from being pride, but it's something like, well, you have problems with your area. You can't, perform for your wife. And it surprised me. Maybe if you're constantly thinking in your head an over sexualized mindset that,
Right.
one, I have to do this all the time. You know as much as I do. I mean, if there's, I think this is the natural cycle of things. I'll just say stuff works a lot better when you don't constantly try to use it all the time. If they could,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, yeah. And the thing, that's why I was talking a little bit about the science, because even in the public schools, they teach it, that it's normal and to do it as much as you want, whatever. And this, I mean, and it really, really has a negative effect, not only physically, but psychologically,
Well,
you
physiologically,
know?
even how many young men now are struggling with, I don't know what's the word. What's the two words that say you basically can't get an erection? What am I drawing a blank here?
Um,
The medical
and you just
proper
made me
term.
get a blank.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you know what it is. They take drugs.
ED,
Yeah. Yeah.
ED.
Yeah. Erectile dysfunction. Yeah. That is something that I feel like is they said it's a growing epidemic among young people. And that they go, well, is it cardiovascular issues? I'm like, I don't think it's really their physical health. I mean, that could be a part of it. A lot of it, I'm sure they're mentally. I mean, half the stuff we know this is mental. I mean, just getting
Right.
them to do something. So if you're constantly exposed to that, I mean, yeah, the idea of people like I see some of these things on the Catholic forums, like, well, what do you do if you're not attracted to your wife or you don't do this? I'm like, I honestly think people that say that stuff are people that are struggling in this area we're talking about.
Oh,
Because if you really have staying in
there's
this
no
long enough, I
question.
don't care what your wife looks like, you'll be okay. So you'll be
Well, to back that up,
no offense to anyone's
to,
wife or we shouldn't. Yeah, I
well,
don't.
no, it's what. Let's be honest, okay? There's so the married women out there, would you find it
Or men.
attractive? Yeah,
Yeah.
or men.
Yeah.
Who finds it attractive if you're just laying around, you're watching soap operas all day, you're not taking care of yourself. We were
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
exercise. So working out, exercising, going out, fishing, hiking, those kinds of things are going
Very
to keep you in
important.
shape. And it also does away with a lot of the stress. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Now, as far as being attracted, there's the guy was attracted to her for some reason at some point.
Yeah.
So you need to refine that. Okay. And so for men that don't know this, I'll fill you in. A woman's sexuality runs off her emotions.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
if there is not an emotional intimacy there with your wife, she's going to shut down. She's going to have a lot of headaches through the week. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so this is what I was saying, as far as men go, we can cure 99% of the problems in our marriage if we would just open our ears and not just listen to what they're saying, but really hear what they're saying and take their feelings and their concerns as genuine as we would our own. But
Mm-hmm.
nine times out of 10, what happens is when they start voicing concerns to us, we're already formulating a what do you call it? An argument in our head,
Mm-hmm.
or a defense. And we need to stop thinking and start listening more, And I would say the same thing goes for the woman. If you can find a woman that a man can really sit down to and talk with, okay, I can tell you again, 99.9% of the time, a man who struggles in the area of looking at things he shouldn't be looking at is never going to tell his wife. Imagine having a wife or a relationship with your wife in such a way where you could sit down and say, you know what, I'm being tempted with this,
Yeah.
and not feel any shame.
Yeah.
And the woman be completely understanding to that. And then you begin to pray together as a couple, as a married couple in the sacrament, that would even make it more powerful.
On that note, and this is maybe somewhat related. I don't think it'll be off topic. I think it's going right with what you're saying, but it made me think about this. And this is something I think with Protestant men that I've talked to, they don't see the connection sometimes with Catholic social teachings on this matter, because they feel like, well, once you're married, and at least you had a kid, or you tried to have a kid, or you got many kids, you can kind of do whatever you want. Anything kind of goes. And I've kind of explained to my friend, he was one of my close friends who's a Protestant, kind of admitted the fact that, no, I think you guys are onto something, that you can be hypersexualized even within a marriage.
Yeah.
To the point where I heard this, I was watching, actually, it was Jordan Peterson had something on, I think it was actually called Marriage. It was his talk about marriage, and he got into this area. I'm not judging the guy, but as I'm listening to it, I'm like, if I had these same thoughts of what he was saying, this to me would be at least bad for me, because we got in this thing of, well, he had preferences and how you should entertain these preferences, and then they can go on to other things, your habits, your interests, basically your sexual interests might change throughout your marriage, what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, like, you start going down this road of every other week and every 2 weeks, I got to analyze what my new preferences are, and I want to get this special outfit for this. I mean, it's one thing to spice things up, but it's another thing to be thinking, like, I'm turning this into a restaurant that I want to change the decorations out every week.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that is just not healthy. And then again, it goes back to the point of just having your brain hypersexualized. And even if it's in the confines of marriage, I don't think it's that good. I think it's damaging. Again, you start looking at your wife as an object.
As an object, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And vice versa. It can be vice versa as well.
Yeah, for sure.
This is why I was saying the emotional connection. Whether men want to admit it or not, we're very emotional. Okay, as well as visual. We just have a very, very hard time expressing that. As where women are, they are very easy. It's easier for them to express their emotions. It's one of the reasons I talked about guys needing time with guys and girls needing time with girls. Okay, but if there is that spiritual connection between man and wife, and it really starts. The foundation of that really starts with their relationship with God. Okay. See, I don't know that you can have a true, intimate, deep relationship with God and not at the same time receive the grace or the virtue of humility. You see what I mean? Yeah. And so when that happens, it's like I said, God pours his love into us, and then that love flows out from us to the other.
Yeah.
Okay. And in a marriage, in a sacrament of marriage, that's where that's consummated. And so I would say that, at its highest level, it should almost be a spiritual experience.
Yeah, no,
just as much as it is a physical experience. And it's really a mystery. Paul uses the analogy that he's speaking in reference to Christ and the church when he talks about bride and groom, and he talks about the married couple. But that when in him making that analogy, do you realize you can't get any more intimate than that?
Yeah,
it is intimate on such a deep level that really has nothing to do physically. Now, the physical act is obviously the sign of the consummation of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's the outward sign, the outward expression of that deep interior love. Mm-hmm. And so the love has to be the source of the outward sign, I guess is what I'm saying. And we've kind of got it backwards. It's reversed, Yeah. And so
towards the end here, let's we probably already said a lot here already, but if someone getting brass tacks again, someone's like, well, I'm hearing what you're saying. I like what you guys are saying. What are some practical tips? And we'll just say at all stages of life, maybe they can apply to everything. I didn't do a good job about segmenting everything up here. We're going to go at different stages here, but I think they all apply. But I'll start first and just saying the first thing I noticed, this is an easy one, is just you have to start stripping away anything that is just tickling the fancy of your brain. And everyone's a little different.
Yeah.
And I even go back to, I think that we talked about last time, the rise of, maybe we didn't, but I think we talked the rise of how veils are coming back, but just the rise in, what's the word we call it? Modesty culture.
Modesty,
in a lot of female circles, which I think is good. And sometimes that's demonized, but at the end of the day, I mean, we all remember, I don't know if you remember when the yoga pants probably came in, but I remember when
I remember the spandex came in.
We can see the incremental stages of all this has gotten, just dials have been cranked. But I remember when the Lululemon stores first came out, And I was probably in high school or something like that, or maybe. But I just remember the word in the street was, you just got to walk in that store. You wouldn't believe it. Like you're getting access to something you didn't see out in public.
Right.
And then not only that, now it's the point where you'd see some of that stuff in some gyms and coming in a gym, and now it's like, well, that's just what everybody wears now.
It's every gym you go to. Yeah,
To the point where 8-year-old girls are wearing this stuff.
I work out in my garage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, same here. Well, and that's a good point. I saw a priest somewhere say men should not be going to the gym because of this reason. I'm not going to apply it to every single man, and you got to, check your own sensors here, but that might be you. I mean, you might literally have to cancel your gym membership and go somewhere else because that is going to be too much for you to handle. So
yeah, and it's not to say that every woman that goes into the gym dressed like that is looking for attention.
Of course,
they may just feel comfortable.
I understand that.
I know that I know a number of women that love the yoga pants because they're just comfortable.
Well, I had this debate literally. I had almost every other week with my wife. She doesn't wear those types of yoga pants, but I've said this before. I'm like, it's out of hand. She's like, well, I think it's just comfortable. I'm like, I guess they're comfortable. Well, how much more comfortable or short? Like I have loose fitting cargo pants on. They're about. I wear spandex and they're comfortable.
I would say this. I would say that keep in mind that when a woman says comfortable, she might mean something else.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. So, fair enough.
I would. That's the way I would. That's where I kind of.
But you and I both know we can't say comfort as an excuse because then all hell can break loose at that point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah. And so I will say that. To beat these things, okay, to where they don't affect you. And when I say affect you, I'm talking about falling into sin. It doesn't mean you're not going to be tempted. Okay. Right. I just went over to Kohl's. I think it was like 3 or 4 days ago. I went over to Kohl's to buy some school shirts for my kid. And this girl walked by, and I'm not kidding. I was confronted with temptation. I mean, just absolutely drop dead gorgeous, right? But you have to recognize the temptation. And so I don't think it's any different for me than it is for most men. Yeah. We're visual creatures. It doesn't matter how old you get. A beautiful woman is a beautiful woman. That's never going to go away. Okay. What can go away is the way you confront temptation when it confronts you. That's what can be dealt with. And to where you recognize see a beautiful woman and you can give glory to God for creating such a beautiful creature. But once you realize that's God's daughter, that's another way to look at it. This is a daughter of God, and the way it comes, and I think that's like this for most men, it will come very subtly and in increments. Okay. So once you start toying with the temptation, then you're going to be sent another one. And then you're going to be sent another one. And then you're going to be sent another one. And so it's almost like the devil's leading you breadcrumbs. And the next thing you know, you're in a place you never thought you'd be, whether you're, looking at something online or you're looking at a magazine or, with the social media now, you got some girl sending you pictures that's not your wife or not your girlfriend, or worse, you fall into adultery. Okay. Yeah. Which, we know from Jesus, just looking at a woman in lust is adultery.
And you might kind of hit on this with the spiritual aspect of it, but we also can't think if someone was just looking agnostic or atheist and hearing this stuff, we also can imagine how this affects us. You already said it, but psychologically, just realizing if you're going down some weird rabbit hole of stuff, or you just whatever, or it could be somewhat normal stuff. I don't want to say normal. I'm losing that very loosely, but my point is everything that you visually see is impacting now forever. Whether you can, it's hard to. I don't want to say it's like it's strapped on you can't get rid of yourself of that, but point is we all know these images that we can get in our brain.
Exactly,
and especially for a young person, especially if you both fathers. The importance of keeping the innocence as long as we can. And when you meet someone, like I'll use my dad as the example I just said earlier, even my Protestant friend who grew up, I'll just say pretty much innocent life. Mm-hmm. And he realized how lucky he was. He didn't realize it. He just thought it was kind of naive, whatever. I'm like, but nowadays in our culture, being innocent is not cool.
Right.
Because of the devil. I mean, this kind of influence, but the idea of like, yeah, if you can hold your innocence, why would you want to get rid of that? I mean, I think even Christ tells us, be like children. So
right, exactly.
Hold your innocence as long as I can. If anything, I think most men need to go back to their roots. And if it's matter like, yeah, don't watch any R movies, don't watch, be like a little kid again, just watch simple stuff. If that's what you have to do.
Remove it. I heard I know it was a priest, but I can't remember if the priest was an exorcist. I believe he was, but the way he phrased it was kind of like you did. But what he said, it's like files, like a filing cabinet in your mind. And once that's filed, it doesn't get unfiled, and you can bring it back up. It can come back up at any time, any given time. There are things that I looked at when I was young that I still remember vividly.
Yeah.
And so it's like a filing cabinet in your head.
Which the devils which we know from the Exorcist, people are exorcists basically discuss this, that while a devil can't read your mind, it has access to your imagination.
Yep.
So I think I would assume that's kind of free reign of going through those files and then just throwing them out in the front, forefront.
Right. And so that's really where you can kind of contrast the dark between the light, right? So if like, I'll use the example when I was in Kohl's. Okay. This was just last week. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, I almost went and asked her if she wanted a coffee. It's really, really pretty, right? But when I was confronted with that, you're confronted with, am I going to allow myself to fall into the dark side of this, or to admire this woman's beauty for what it is in a
well, to be fair, you're in a stage where you could do that. I mean, that's why, my advice, he's young now, but I said eventually, I forgot how to phrase it now, but when he gets older, I would say, well, you're going to use this energy as a good energy. I mean, use this energy to pursue a good wife and try and work hard and realize, like, yeah, this is something God gave you this drive for a reason.
Right.
But, and again, at your stage in life too, I mean, if all fairness, we don't know. I mean, if you was single, didn't have a ring on her finger, I mean, there's nothing wrong with you pursuing that lust. To a certain degree.
The other thing I would say is there's a very fine line between temptation and sin. Okay. And so again, I think a lot of men that are trying to be perfect in this, or try to overcome that kind of thing, sometimes think they're falling into sin when they're not. They're confusing temptation with sin. Okay. And so, for the younger men that are out there that are going to watch this, or even men or that are, my age or your age, that don't understand it, understand that if you don't start toying with those thoughts, you haven't fallen into sin.
Yeah.
You're being tempted. And so every time that temptation is there, and I would say I'd be willing to bet, and I don't know, I can't say for sure. Maybe I shouldn't even go there. I would be willing to bet that for most men, that when they see a beautiful woman, okay, there is that moment of temptation. Okay, I would say also that most men who are living their faith are not going to fall into that temptation. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but some of them may confuse the temptation with sin and then beat themselves up over scrupulosity, like you said, being over scrupulous and saying, I failed. And once a man starts telling himself that the devil's got a foothold. That's what he wants men to believe. It's one of the reasons that he uses the sexual sins to bring men down, because inevitably what a man will feel is shame. And when a man is full of shame, he's been defeated.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse that you can do to a man than to shame him. And you could use any number of examples. You take a bunch of guys that are on a camping trip, and 2 or 3 of the guys start picking on one dude that's there. Well, it's only a matter of time before the one dude gets tired and hauls off and hits one of them. It's an aggressive thing, you see. So you can only put a guy down so much before he reacts. You see what I mean? But that's what the devil wants to do through sexual sin, is shame men, and through the shame defeat them. And once you get rid of the men, you've got no one to protect the woman. You've got no one to protect the children. And that is why from my perspective, okay, and again, the way I have overcome it is understanding who Satan is, what he's after, and what he wants to do to those that I love. I am the first line of defense. And so when you start winning those battles, then all of a sudden words like courage come, words like honor, words like warrior. You see what I mean? So we were talking about conquering the passions. It is a spiritual battle that when you start to win those battles, the words that start entering a man's mind, other than embarrassment and shame and I fell and I'm no good. And although then you start, when you start winning those initial battles, okay, then it's like courage, perseverance, strength, warrior. You see, and so we have to approach it. When you approach it from a warrior mentality, and the thing that's coming to my mind right now is Andrew Tate, right? Because this guy's a fighter. He's a warrior. He's a tough. He's everything any young guy would want to be. But the one thing he doesn't control is his passions.
Yeah.
And that is the hard thing to control. You know,
That's
being
why I
a
think this
warrior
is such
easy.
an important topic, because there's not many people saying this. And I would say even in Catholic circles, sometimes they say it, but it's kind of subtle. Or, you don't get down to brass tacks about what that struggle's like. They don't talk about it. And I think men do need role models when they see it is possible, just like any physical feat. Physical
Right,
feats are broken all the time because they see what was possible. And I
right.
think young men want that battle, and I think they would admire
Well,
just
yeah, and again, if you approach it from the standpoint, I'm speaking specifically to men here, right? And you know this as well, Mike. I think you approach it the same way. If you approach it from the standpoint that you are in a war with a demon that wants to destroy you and destroy your family, and you're the first line of defense, it's a lot easier to go into that battle. It's a lot easier to say, okay, I'm being tempted, but you know what? I'm not giving into that, because once I'm out of the way, and specifically the rosary and also the sacramentals, okay, blessed salt and holy water, have a priest pray over you. You can do that after mass in the sacristy or before mass, or just running into it, being in adoration, you run into a priest, says, Father, can you pray over me to not fall into this temptation, that
and the
God gives me the
vital, and
strength.
I think the vital importance just popped to my brain too, of from the father's point of view, and I guess anyone else who's in your scope of influence, could be a nephew, even a niece for that matter. We're talking about males though first, to make sure you're protecting those people around you. And I was
Right.
thinking, I saw pictures. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but this will never happen. If it does, Vince, come to my house and slap me upside the head. But I saw pictures of my I don't think he's watching, but I have a couple of nephews. One of my nephews is a very, very good kid, but it was just, he goes to a big it's a good high school. And I saw the prom pictures and what the people were wearing, and I couldn't believe, and this is just normal. These are upper middle class people. This is not whatever. The stuff these girls were wearing, I could not
Mm-hmm.
believe. I mean, this was something you would be going to pay Vegas to see something like this.
Yeah.
And these are, underage girls seeing this. And the first thought in my head wasn't necessarily the girls. It was, what are these fathers and what are these parents thinking? So I'm seeing pictures of, they're up the staircase, probably 40 kids, I don't know, 30, 40 kids posing together. And there's a whole corral of people underneath, drinks in their hand, all the parents, is a big social gathering. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking, what in the hell's going on? And I'm like, I can't be the only one thinking this. There has to be at least one guy in there, two guys in there who didn't have the balls to say, this is crazy, and pull your daughter. Remember, your guy or their boyfriend was there too. Like, this is not right. This is
Right. Well, see,
twisted.
and that right there, what you're describing is exactly what I was saying about the effect Satan has when we start opening those doors. And you look at the society we live in. This demon Asmodeus has run over the country. That's why I call it, it's like a plague. It is a spiritual sickness, a plague, and we have to start fighting against it. If we don't, it's going to lead to a lot worse things. You look at the sexualization of children today. You know, the other thing I would say is, in regards to men defeating this type of thing personally, on a personal level, is to understand that I don't care. I don't care who it is. I don't care how spiritual they are. I don't care how close to God they may have come. Anyone can fall at any given time.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's another thing to understand. See, and really, it just comes from real good spiritual direction on my part. Okay, we hear it all the time, but it's so important. Don't put yourself in a near occasion of sin.
Yeah.
You don't put yourself in a position to where something,
So important.
yeah. And so, I've been. It's one of the reasons I don't spiritually direct women anymore, because that, even though I did everything right, nothing ever happened. Used protective prayers, blessed salt, holy water. The temptation got to the point to where I had to cut it off.
Yeah.
This isn't going to, I can't do this.
Makes
And
sense.
so we have to admit to ourselves, sometimes we're not strong enough to do certain things. You see what I mean? And so as far as what you were describing is exactly what I was talking about. That is the effect of men opening that door.
Yeah.
You see, because if we want to protect women, we're not going to be looking at something that's going to unleash hell on our families, on our schools, on our children. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, when you stand back, just stand back and just look at the United States alone. It's a hookup culture.
Yeah.
You know, most men, it's unfortunate, but this is true. Most men your son's age will end up marrying a female who has had multiple partners.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
or not marrying at all. I mean, that was your statistic here. Is that a lot of them?
There you go. Make him a priest, Mike.
No, I mean, no. I'm saying, unfortunately, these guys are not becoming priests. They're just playing video games, till to the middle ages and feel like that. Yeah. That's the other thing I heard too. I saw this, I don't know, weeks ago, but you can imagine why it's true. It was just a statistic of, and this is a sad statistic, obviously, aside from if they're promiscuous or not, that they've just chosen not to. They don't need a woman. They don't need any kind of long-term relationship. And this goes the same for the females because they can't find a guy they're looking for. But this person, they don't need to because all their sexual needs are fulfilled. They can get off whatever they want. And they're not motivated. I can stay home and play video games. I don't want to deal with a mortgage or a house or a wife. I can just do whatever.
Kids and all that.
I don't need that.
Want. Yeah, a lot of it.
We know deep down they're not fulfilled. I mean, you know that that's not happening.
Right.
But that's the other.
I think there's from what I've seen, it's starting to trend. But starting to trend in the other direction. In where men are just don't want to date because of what kind of what we talked about in the last video with this neo-feminism, where I don't need, the women have been taught, and this is what they're being taught in society, on the internet, on social media, is that, what they refer to as a high value man, makes 140K, 200 a year, drives a Ferrari. The woman doesn't have to worry about money. She can do whatever she wants. And so they've set the standard so high that most men will never make that kind of money. Most men want a traditional woman, and that's what they're realizing. And
a woman might ask for what the modern man is,
right?
And they still want to work and do all these other things. And we're not going to work with a child care to the future, and that's just we'll work with that later on. And then they get to the point where they realize, okay, this is not what I really signed up for. And I've heard so many stories that I can't even work with young people. I won't go into too much detail where these are smart. Yeah, and again, nothing against a girl working, of course, but you got to start thinking a little bit in the future that no one says this preparing. This is a whole separate discussion. Mm-hmm. But what is the value of motherhood and the special characteristics that a mother has? And they realize that once they start working full time, they put all this money in their education. They got to pay it off. They go to school and they want to get married. They get married and they realize, oh, shoot, I don't have any time with my kid at all. The state's going to raise my kid. And I didn't realize that was something that could have been, that was instilled in me. No one was teaching him these things.
Yeah. I agree with you. There's been a number of people that I've seen on the internet, older women that regretted living the lifestyle that they were taught to live through social media, because now now they've got 2 kids. They're not married. No one's interested, all that kind of stuff. And it's like their whole life fell apart, and they're looking back and kind of, wishing they would have done things differently. I think in the same way that it's like I say with women, even it's swinging in the other direction. We're really starting to see the fruits of the whole feminist movement and where it's led to, and how unhappy not only women but men are. Remember, I was talking about, because they're kind of pitting against each other, men against women or men against women and women against men. Where they don't need it. It's really an attack. It's really a tactic of the devil to destroy the nuclear family. Our birth rate in the United States is lower than it has ever been. And it happens, it's funny, if you study, well, I won't say funny, it's interesting. If you study history, every time just before any great empire fell, right, it became very productive, very rich, very prosperous, very powerful. The birth rate went down and it collapsed. So we're right there.
But Vince, we don't have to. We got robots to take care of us, Vince. We don't have to worry about that. Romans didn't have
Yeah.
the robots.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be a good idea.
Just
Though
kidding.
some of these scientists will probably start adding AI and super soldier blood to that kind of thing. I don't know if that's going to work out well. I wouldn't be surprised if they're already up to it. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Well,
um,
I think in a positive way, like you said, I think you for sure see there's a remnant, but it's a growing remnant of that traditional culture and families and male female roles, etc. That I think is for sure growing, and I think a lot of young people are seeking that. And my prayer to my kids, I'm sure your kids as well, is that they get nurtured in that those traditional values, and they can find that they can be part of that remnant. As I put.
yeah. Well, I think we have to stay. We got to stay away from the what the world presents to us as the perfect guy or the perfect girl. You know, most women are. In my experience anyway, most women are very attuned to their body, what they look like, their figure, and that. This is another reason. It's like I say, stay in shapes, stay workout. That kind of is, and for guys and girls, do what's going to make you feel good. In other words, this is for me personally. Okay, I'm not a motivator. I'm not an online influencer. But for me personally, when I end my day, right before I go to bed, okay, I pray, and then I think about how can I become a better version of myself tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that line of thought that you would get from an Andrew Tate or a one of these other influencers that are out there, right? All you're adding into that is spirituality. You're
Yeah.
adding in your Catholic faith, and so then you become well rounded.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so not only that, I think maybe you grow in wisdom a little bit. It's like I said, because anyone could fall. I mean, if I were to make the choice, it's Labor Day, right? So it's Monday. If I were to make the choice, like I said, no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've been, you can fall. If I were to make the choice to get off this video with you and head out to, let's say, San Francisco or Modesto and go into a bar and, what? I just feel like drinking. I'm going to go. I have no idea where I could end up tonight, Mike. But it's a matter of choices. Don't make the choice. You see what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I didn't actually quit the gym because of the way the girls were dressed. I didn't like the whole feel of the place.
Yeah.
But that was a part of it. But you'll get to a point as a man to where you don't even find that attractive.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
the discernment process within you as you grow in faith. Okay, you will be able to discern the intentions
and
of
I think
them.
a
And
rightly ordered kid would notice that, and that's I think even I think they would catch
yeah,
that, who's and I don't want to go too much in a rant, but I know some families that are very traditional families, and by traditional, like you walk in their house and you feel like you walk back 50 years, but
yeah,
all power to them. Like their kids are always just so nice, so sweet. And I'm thinking even the girls I've talked, that they can talk for themselves in the sense that they're more mature than most 40 plus year old women that I know already today.
right,
And but they also have very humble upbringing. It's not like these are you said we had these examples of these women that want these double, triple, six-figure income, stuff like that. Very modest living, and the wife again, it can be, I guess, I don't want to judge anyone's circumstance, but the point was, I mean, it's a lot of work to maintain just the house being at home. So the physicality is already kind of, that box is checked. If
right.
the guy's doing kind of his thing, me and you both are workout, fans and freaks, but at the same time, it doesn't take a whole lot to take care of yourself. But at the end of the day,
No, I
like
don't.
we don't want to make it be this spirituality is an internal thing that can be obviously years of work, but we never also want to make it feel like there's these lofty things that are put on ourselves. That when I see these families that are really growing, they're solid in their faith, it's the most simplest of simplest living that I
Yeah,
always find is ironic that we're all
yeah, and
seeing
a lot
these
of it
giant
is
cars, and these guys just have a simple house, simple life, and you can tell they're most at peace people I see.
yeah. They're content. They're
Yeah,
fulfilled. And so the online influencing thing and the whole workout thing. I think I probably should add into that, and you actually just brought it to my attention, is that the way it's portrayed in the media. Okay, it's all about self image,
yeah,
and that's why you have all the Instagram girls, all the Instagram models, the OnlyFans, this, that, and the other, and they're making a lot of money doing it, but it's all about self. And so, this is what I was mean when I was saying that, I've seen a number of interviews with girls that were involved in that kind of thing, made millions of dollars. And they, at the end of it, they were so depressed and unhappy. They just were never fulfilled. And I also, with the family thing, I think it's a generational thing. So, people that know my upbringing, it was rough. I didn't have that father figure. He taught me some hard lessons that I think have stayed with me for a long time. But I didn't have that father figure to teach me the faith, to teach me about women, to teach me about, I had to learn everything through experience,
Yeah.
Whether bad or good.
Yeah.
But if there's one man that will turn, he can turn that whole thing around.
Yeah.
And so what I can say in just watching my oldest son with his family, he's doing a lot better job than I did at the age he is when I was that age.
Yeah.
And so it kind of rolls over onto itself,
Yeah.
And so, it kind of depends on your upbringing as well. But I would agree with that. I think the traditional family is where both man and woman are going to find to be ultimately fulfilled in life, because when it comes right down to it, I've often said that just in conversations with people, because I'm not married, so what do you call it? The topic comes up, right? Some of my friends like to bring it up, and then they bring in age and this and that, and I don't really see it. For me, age is just a number. It always has been. Okay, to a certain extent, obviously, it's about moments. You know what I mean? And when you can make moments in life that you cherish with another human being that you're in love with, that's where the fulfillment comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a selflessness that comes with that on both sides. We talked about, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And sacrificed himself, but just gave himself for everything that he was for the church. In the same way, women, wives, respect your husbands in the same way the church respects Christ. And so when that meets, it's like I say, if the two people have that foundation, if they have that relationship with God, that's where the fulfillment is going to come in, because then everything else, like, what's being pushed into our minds through social media, through online influencers, all of that comes together, but it comes together in righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and you're conquering these passions as a team, as you rightfully should, and not
exactly
going in solo. I think this is a good place. Oh, sorry, I was going to wrap it up, but you got something else to say, because I know we can go another 2 hours now.
This one specifically for the guys. Okay, if you end up falling into looking at other women and looking at things you shouldn't look at, don't be surprised if your wife is looking at other guys.
Good point. Yeah. It's
So
a very good point.
Yeah. So don't do anything you wouldn't want your wife to do.
There you go.
Yeah.
Most guys would think that's not going to happen. They think they got control, but they don't. Yeah.
No, like I said, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're at. You can always fall. So you guys want to have each other's back. That's really Adam and Eve in the garden. It was Adam's job to protect her, but why Eve had a very, very specific role.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything a man could want more than knowing his wife has his back at all times.
Yeah.
No, that's a powerful thing, and so, we may come across as warriors and strong and, workout guys and, whatever. There's guys are a lot weaker than most women think.
Yeah.
That may be what they see on the outside. That's not what's going on the inside. A man wants a woman that will respect him and have his back at all costs.
Yes.
In the same way that, a woman wants a man that is going to honor her.
Yeah. And we gotta never forget. This will start a whole nother yarn, but we gotta say this for another video. But it's the importance of sacramental marriage too. I mean, that's something I hear a lot about. Don't realize the value of the sacramental marriage too, and what that means. So,
well, you got the blessing of the church. There's no more protection than that, right?
Yeah.
So,
all right, Vince. Well, we got the books we plugged at the start of the hour. We'll put them down below in the description box, and we'll keep doing this. If people want to keep listening, I will. I don't care if no one watches. I just have a good time talking to you. We're just hitting the record button. So
Yeah, well,
we'll
it's very rare that I talk with you for any amount of time and I don't learn something, Mike. So
no,
I
likewise,
appreciate
likewise.
your time,
Well,
man. I
that's what we
really
said
do.
day one. I mean, it's the men's group. I think that happens all the time. So I love it. I'm always learning something.
Cool.
All
Awesome,
right,
brother.
Vince. Thanks, brother. I'll see you.
Peace out. Talk to you soon.